When it comes to taking the fight to Anton Castillo and the FND, every guerrilla needs a rock-solid resolver weapon, but not all options are created equal, and that, my friends, is why we're here. Hey there, it's Codiak, one half of the team behind Legacy Gaming, and you better believe it's time to dive into Far Cry 6 to determine which resolver weapon is the best of the best. As always, I have to remind you all that ranking videos are completely subjective. What I think is good may not be what you think is good, and that's completely fine. If you disagree with me, that's cool. Let me know in the comments section and let me know why. I love reading your feedback on these videos, and oftentimes members of our community have changed my mind on any particular topic. Today, of course, we're talking about resolver weapons. This is probably one of my most anticipated aspects of Far Cry 6. I've shot enough MP5s and AK-47s to last me a lifetime, but give me a damn nail gun and I'm happy as a clam. Before we dive into the actual rankings, I want to set some ground rules because I think it's important we have some sort of baseline for how we're evaluating these weapons. The first rule is that we'll be judging these items based on their first form, without any resolver mods. Each weapon has multiple mods, and that does change the nature of some of the weapons, so I think it's best we keep things baseline. Second, we'll be judging these weapons based on how practical they are in would-be combat. This means focusing on how they each fare against groups of enemies and individual enemies. Finally, we'll ask the simple question, would I take this weapon into combat? And with those three ground rules in place, let's dive in to the rankings. Leave it to Ubisoft to make a pre-order weapon so incredibly bad. The Discos Locos is just a mess from top to bottom. It's a brilliant concept and one that really steps outside the box, which I love, but the actual application of this weapon is a joke. For anyone that doesn't know, this is a weapon that fires CDs. I think the idea is that you spin them up fast enough, they're flying discs of death. Honestly, I don't know. While the stat page touts high damage, I found this weapon to be nothing short of a huge disappointment. The first issue is the magazine size. 5 discs. I mean, seriously, that is nothing, and considering the fact that you're definitely not one-shotting enemies very often, it's a huge problem and a huge reason why this weapon suffers. The second issue is the lack of a scope and a solid aiming system. The weapon is meant to be fired from the hip. When done so, the discs shatter, which is cool in theory, but again, just not that impressive. Ultimately, the Discos Locos just isn't that practical. Terrible sight picture, small magazine, and it just doesn't fit into any real situation in the game. I wouldn't use it to snipe enemies while taking down an FND base, and I definitely wouldn't be running into a checkpoint with my CD launcher locked and loaded. Nope, the Discos Locos is just not the weapon for this guerrilla. I really like the whole idea of Viviro, a crazy chemical that can cure cancer, but with a little mad science and a drop of dictator, you've got this ridiculous chemical weapon. It's a crazy concept, and it works in the world of Far Cry, so I understand why El Besito is in the game. The thing is, anything Viviro-based just isn't that practical from my point of view. Turning enemies against each other is pretty neat, but that's what poison bullets are for. Trying to run into any densely enemy-populated area with El Besito is just asking for trouble. From where I stand, we've got a few problems. The first is that the range of the weapon is just not that great, and I mean, what do you expect? It's a flamethrower-style launcher. Range has never been that great on those things. That means you have to get pretty close to your enemies to do any real damage. There is an alt-fire mode where you can charge up a blast of Viviro, but that absolutely decimates your ammo supply. You may turn 1, 2, or even 3 soldiers, but trying to clear out an entire base with just El Besito is not possible. I could see this weapon ranking higher if there were more enclosed areas in the game, but considering the fact that about 80% of the combat is outside, it reduces the effectiveness of the weapon quite a bit. It's a cool resolver gun in theory, but at the end of the day, this is not something I'd rely on in combat to get the job done. Moving up to the C tier, we have to start with Zuzito. I really want to love this weapon, but it's got some limitations. This battery-powered railgun does pretty much what you'd expect, disable electronics. It's an EMP weapon, and while those are valuable in Far Cry 6, they're niche. Zuzito has the ability to stop everything, from tanks to planes dead in their tracks, and that is valuable. It's also not terrible against soldiers. A blast will stun them, and depending on how charged up your shot is, it can do some real damage. The issue with this weapon is the ammo capacity. It's not great, and while you could argue that's because this weapon is designed specifically for taking out vehicles, I'd say you're probably right. If you watched our Wish I Knew Sooner tips and tricks video, you saw that we relied on EMP rounds and a launcher to take out vehicles. And while I think that's incredibly good, You could free up an entire secondary weapon slot by using Zusito in the Resolver slot. That would allow you 2 primary weapons while still having a utility weapon to deal with tanks, planes, boats, and whatever else Castillo throws at you. At the end of the day, I think Zusito is a decent weapon in the right situation, but because it's so niche and there are strong alternatives, I think it's pretty much capped out at the C tier. Also in the C tier, we have La Sorpresa, another really unique gun, albeit niche. In theory, this thing is badass, a high-caliber sniper rifle that shoots out an explosive projectile. Sounds awesome, right? No, you're wrong. This is one of those guns that sounds so much better on paper than in actual practice. The first issue is the single-shot round and long reload time. Because there's an explosive component to it, the moment you fire your first shot and it detonates, enemies will become alert. They sound the alarm, and all of a sudden you've got 10 to 20 enemies on your tail, and a sniper rifle that can fire one shot every 15 seconds or so just doesn't work. When La Sorpresa really shines is surgical strikes on key targets, small vehicles, helicopters, anything you need to blow up to make a statement. It's not a weapon designed to take out masses of soldiers, it's a very particular weapon with a particular purpose. The real shame is that the explosive is okay at best. It falls way short of a rocket launcher, and the impact could probably most closely be compared to a grenade launcher. At the end of the day, this weapon is facing an identity crisis. Does it want to be a sniper or a launcher? I think the answer is a little bit of both, and that's why it gets the middle of the road C rank. We've got one final entry in the C tier, and it's La Clavadora. Once again, we fall victim to really interesting concepts, not a great execution. This is a giant Yaren-style harpoon thrower capable of dealing insane single-target damage, but because of its long reload time and situational effectiveness, it's just not that great of a weapon. It's kind of a one-and-done deal, and we run into the exact same problem we had with La Sorpresa, a devastating single shot with a long reload. The only saving grace here is that the weapon is silent, so you don't have to worry about alerting the guards. The drawback, of course, is that you lose the explosive power. So in my mind, you can use La Clavadora as a pseudo-sniper. It's really powerful and can take out pretty much any soldier in one shot, and that's exactly what you want. If you can deal with the sight picture and limited zoom from the scope, you can free up your primary and secondary weapon slots for other types of weapons. You still have a strong silent killer in your back pocket, and as long as you embrace its situational nature, you may find it's exactly what you need. Not the best Resolver weapon in the game, but definitely not the worst. Give me a shotgun and a shield any day of the week and watch the magic commence. El Muro is our first entry into the B tier, and rightfully so. This weapon is really fun to use, and if you're someone that likes to rush headfirst into combat or get sloppy when on a stealth mission, this thing is lights out. What's so great about El Muro is its flexibility. The primary weapon is a shotgun, which is great for taking out pretty much everything. If you run across somebody with a helmet, you can use your shield as a melee weapon, bashing their face in until they're exposed. It's a great 1-2 punch, and I mean that quite literally. I just found this weapon to be fun, and at the end of the day, isn't that what we want? Of course, there are drawbacks. This is a shotgun after all, and if you're expecting any sort of range, you're in for a shocker. It's a close quarters weapon, plain and simple, and while I'd like to think the shield keeps me nice and protected, I still felt a little squishy behind that steel wall. It's a great weapon that gets the job done, and definitely one I'd take into combat, but a few limitations hold it back from being a supreme Resolver weapon. Flamethrowers are great. That's why Tostador is also getting a B rank. This thing does exactly what you think it does, shoots out fire at a blistering pace. The Ubisoft team even gave this weapon 2 firing modes, which I really like. When firing from the hip, you get a more horizontal spread, perfect for taking out groups of enemies. When aiming down the sight, you get a nice jet of flames and a little bit more range. I don't know of any other game that's done this with their flamethrowers, but I'll take this variation every time. Compared to El Basito, I think Tostador just gives players more flexibility and ultimately more bang for their buck. The magazine capacity and ammo reserve also seem to be more properly balanced, and I can see players really enjoying having a weapon like this that they can switch to on the fly. At the end of the day, it is just a flamethrower, and it suffers from the standard things like range, a long reload time, and the general chaos it causes, but it's still a solid weapon and worthy of its place higher up on our list. Far Cry has always and will always be about guns and bullets, and to be completely honest, El Pequeño is the king of both. This Resolver minigun is just a machine of death, plain and simple. Popping off hundreds of rounds a minute, dealing insane damage, I mean, what can't this weapon do? If you're someone that loves the run-and-gun, messy style of fighting in Far Cry games, this is the perfect companion. With a large magazine, a high rate of fire, solid damage per round, and the simple fact that this weapon is pretty much a mobile turret, there's very little that you can't kill with El Pequeño. It checks off most of the boxes, and while it's not a stealth weapon or capable of landing headshots from 100 meters away, it's good in nearly every firefight situation you can imagine. It's a great weapon that works on paper and in practice, and that's why El Pequeño gets the A rank. If you told me I'd be using a nail gun in 2 AAA games in the same year, I'd say you were crazy. But just like in Arcane Studios' Deathloop, El Sussurro, the Far Cry variant of a nail gun, is straight up incredible. If you're someone that leans into the stealth nature of the game, this weapon is great. If you're someone that just likes killing people with projectile nails, this weapon is also great. El Sussurro checks off almost all the boxes when it comes to what a guerrilla needs in combat. This weapon has a massive magazine, and the damage per round is so impressive that the magazine seems to last forever. Factor in the natural armor penetration, and we're talking about a seriously good weapon. I could sing El Sussurro's praise for days. It's the perfect stealth weapon that I can see anyone rocking as a primary weapon. It falls short in just 2 small areas: its lack of super long range accuracy, mainly due to its weird sight picture, and its inability to really handle any sort of vehicles, and I'd argue doesn't really need either of those things. El Sussurro just fits in the world of Far Cry 6, where combat often takes place in 50 to 75 meter distances, and where stealth and armor pen are king. El Sussurro isn't just an S-tier resolver weapon, it's one of the best in the game, and if you haven't already checked it out, I implore you to do so at your earliest convenience. You want to kill something in style, you need to use Pyrotechno. This firework launcher is just madness, capable of firing off 9 high-damage explosives to great effect. There's nothing subtle about this weapon, but if you're surrounded by soldiers, vehicles, rabid dogs, whatever, this thing will bail you out. To be honest, I think it's a bit overtuned. In no world should dinky fireworks deal more damage than an RPG, but hey, that's the world we live in. When I first used Pyrotechno, I was floored at how easily it just tore through enemies, and in most cases, chewed through vehicles too. Pyrotechno also has one of the coolest firing mechanics I've ever seen in a game. Click once, light 1 firework. Click a few times, light a few fireworks. Aim down your sight and click and hold, and unleash the entire barrage. I mean, honestly, what a blast. The only real drawback with this weapon is the lack of pinpoint accuracy and the strange misfires. I swear, sometimes I'd click and nothing would happen after I lit the fuse, and I'm not sure if that's a bug or intended, but it was odd. Nevertheless, this thing is an absolute beast, and if you don't use it at least once while you're playing Far Cry 6, you must seriously hate having fun. When it comes to a true lights-out weapon, there can only be one, La Varita. This weapon is part of a legendary set for a reason. It's just that good. If you have no idea what I'm talking about or where this weapon comes from, I definitely recommend you check out this video here. We put together a comprehensive guide to unlocking the legendary Triada Blessing set, and for good reason. We think everyone needs this weapon in their life. Alone, La Varita is damn good. It's one of the highest damage dealing weapons in the game, capable of taking out all types of targets. It's got a large magazine, its reload speed is decent, but really need to go on. This weapon is really good, and it will chew through Castillo soldiers no problem. The real magic is when you pair it with the Triador Supremo and activate quote-unquote God mode, or what we call the Ghost of Yara mode. When the Supremo is active, you enter a sort of trance where you can see enemies through walls and shoot them through walls with La Varita. You want to clear out a base, simply walk in, pop your Supremo, bam bam bam, everyone's dead. No one has time to pull the alarm, no reinforcements are coming, it's just that good. La Varita is easily one of, if not the best weapon in Far Cry 6, and it truly deserves to sit at the top of our Resolver tier list. So what do you think? Did we give each of the weapons a fair shake? Let us know your favorite Resolver weapon in the comments section below. Like I said before, I love reading your hot takes, and I'm always open to having my mind changed. If you guys enjoyed this ranking video and you'd like us to continue this series with other aspects of Far Cry 6, please let us know by hitting that thumbs up and subscribing. This is a series we really enjoyed making for Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and we're hoping everyone enjoys it for Far Cry as well, but you gotta let us know. These take a lot of time to put together, and we want to make sure people will actually watch. Finally, if you can't get enough Legacy Gaming, we've got 2 ways for you to get involved. First, you can join us on Discord. We've got a great group of around 7,000 members spread across dozens of great games, so check out that link in the description today. And of course, if you like what we're doing here and you want to support us even more, you can now do so by becoming a member. For just a couple bucks, you're helping evolve the channel and take our community to that next level. Check out the join button below to learn more. My name is Codiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.